Let's do it.
Trauma-informed executive coach. I love that.
Yeah.
Should be an acronym. Trauma-informed executive coach. Does that work? A TEC? TIEC? No. No, you heard it first and it didn't work, everyone. Anyway, what is a trauma-informed executive?
So I would say, if you chunk them up into the two pieces, executive coaching is a lot of leadership coaching. And I think what was interesting is that I was doing a lot of coaching, and there's a fairly strict line of coaching of where you spend your time talking about, the issues that get raised for people. And so it's mostly the present and the future in coaching. And if people start to want to open up the past, like, oh, where did this come from? It's not really, that really starts to move into a therapy-based place, I would say. And so that's sort of the line of, hey, I think, I'm not qualified to go talk about that, because that involves talking about maybe like your past and maybe some of the things that have happened to you. And in the coaching space, that's really, I would say, in terms of, the ethics code that we sign up to, it's really not, it's not allowed, nor I think if you're not qualified and trained in working with people's trauma and pain, it can be a really dangerous place, right? Because you could cause harm.
Dark waters there, I can imagine.
Yeah, and so, I was trained as a coach, and so I really stayed in that lane. And then probably, let's see, in about 2020, 2021, I watched this documentary with Gabor Mate, and it's called The Wisdom of Trauma. And he goes through this process, and he goes through an inquiry-based process, so similar to coaching, asks a lot of questions, but he was doing it for people in their past. And within about 4 questions, people on this documentary are like crying and having a healing moment and, just like really getting into the stuff that created the story that is really plaguing them now in the present day. And I watched this and I was like, I need to learn how to do what this guy is doing, because this is life-changing. People are really being able to unlock some of the things that are holding them in the present. And then I, kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, well, he's like 78 years old. I mean, I think it's time. I'd love to do this with him. I don't know how much longer he's going to live. And, Lee just kind of gotten out of COVID. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to sign up. And so, yeah, within about a week or two, I was, applied to the program and started
It's in Canada, correct?
So it's an online program.
Online.
And so it's a 9-month therapeutic training program. And so you essentially meet bi-weekly online with your cohort, and there was an Asia cohort that we met, and so you're doing a bi-weekly online, you're doing triads and dyads almost once a week, you're in therapy with a compassionate inquiry therapist. So it was a very full-on program.
And Gabor's role in that 9-month process?
So it's his process, and I think what I learned after going to the conference about a year after that is that people were very curious about how he did what he did. And so the backstory is that he's a trained physician. So he's just like a medical doctor, and he was treating drug addicts in East Vancouver. And he would go in and he'd work with people, and he was, trying to offer them treatment. But he was starting to realize that actually none of the treatment was working. So their physical body was not responding to the treatment. So he just started asking and talking to these people that he's working with, and just asking about stories. And what's interesting is that through the work of him connecting with people and their stories, he started to see healing physically. And so over the years, he developed this approach, and they named it compassionate inquiry. What's interesting is I learned that the first couple of cohorts that he tried to train all were not very successful, because the way that he does it is not systematic. It's a very much a sense and respond type of approach. And so if I'm going to sit with you, if I'm trying to go through step 1 is this, step 2 is this, you're going to fail because you're not a robot and running on an algorithm.
Yeah.
And he was just doing his magic essentially by being with the client, attuning with the client, and then really sensing, okay, where would I like to go now? So then there's a woman, Satyaram Kaur, who is she's a, I don't think, what's the breathing yoga?
Oh God.
Oh, it's like fire breath. They've got all these breath. But
There's
she's like
the
a nut.
Tumi breathing that those Tibetan monks sit in the ice and heat up towels. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that. That's amazing. Anyways,
So,
so she Kundalini
oh, go on.
practitioner, right?
Yeah.
And so she watched it and she's like, I can take your process and systematize it. So they watched hundreds of hours of him just doing his thing. And they created a program, this 9-month program, structured around these ideas of stepping stones. So some practices and then stepping stones, so that essentially, like crossing a pond, you get to one stepping stone. You don't necessarily need to go to this one. You could jump to that one. You could jump to that one, jump to that one. And you're really then just with the client, and you have some mastery over how to work each stepping stone. And so that's how they started to train people. And that's the process that I learned. And so Gabor, you watch hundreds of hours of video of him doing his thing. And then I got to meet him and spend some time with him during the conference and do some master classes and have some conversations with him.
I listened to a few of his, I guess you say, presentations on YouTube, or just listening to him speaking. Man, he was inspiring, actually. And he'd be beautiful. I think my heart rate dropped by about 10% just listening to him. I just sort of just went, huh. You know what I mean? Like, just he has this presence.
Yeah.
Drawn face.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can imagine learning from him was an amazing 9 months. And I'm assuming you're still learning the process, or where are you on that journey of just, oh God, I hate the word mastery. I imagine it's a step-by-step process, but as far as where you would like to be.
So what's interesting,
your understanding of that.
Yeah, I finished the program. I started doing a little bit under like essentially a new banner and saying, hey, I can do some therapy. But when I was sitting with people in that therapeutic space and just doing a few hours, I was like, wow, I'm exhausted. So the level of emotional presence that you need to bring to work with people in trauma day in, day out is a different level than coaching.
Yeah.
And a different type of presence that you need to bring. And I just felt like, wow, like I don't have the constitution for this. If I was going to go talk to people about addiction and their childhood trauma every day, I was like, oh, like I can't survive this.
Yeah.
And so actually did it for about a few months, and then came to this conclusion, and then decided, okay, I'm going to jump back into the coaching space. And essentially now I have the ability with a client to say, oh, like we're doing coaching. And we get to a point sometimes where you can see a pattern show up again, right? You can see a story that you're like, oh, I'm just like not good enough, or I can't get there, or like, the world is against me. And now I can offer my clients a choice. And I can say, look, why don't we pause? We can keep going in a coaching type of a conversation. Or there's a different conversation we can have that's a little bit more therapeutic. And I offer you the choice, right? This one's going to ask you, we're going to go into your past. We're going to talk about some things, and it's going to be more somatic based. It's going to be like, where do you feel things? How do you connect with your body and the feeling that you have inside? Whereas this coaching space is more on the like, hey, like, how would you like it to be, and stay more in the coaching space.
Wow.